Good evening, everyone. My name is Petra Slinkard, and I am the Nancy B. Putnam Curator of Fashion and Textiles and the Director of Curatorial Affairs at the Peabody Essex Museum. I am so happy to have you all here with us this evening as we welcome our very, very special guest, Elaine Welteroth, to join us in conversation, fashioning our future, an evening with Elaine Welteroth. We are so excited to have you here. Elaine is a New York Times bestselling author, judge on Project Runway, and a former editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue. She is known for her groundbreaking work at the helm of Teen Vogue, where in 2016, she was appointed the youngest ever editor-in-chief at a Condé Nast publication, and used her position to prioritize diversity and social justice coverage. She is now a leading expert and advocate for the next generation of changemakers. In 2020, Elaine was appointed Cultural Ambassador for Michelle Obama's When We All Vote initiative. And in the wake of George Floyd's murder, she helped launch the 15% Pledge, a nonprofit advocacy organization that recruits major retailers, including Sephora and Macy's, to commit at least 15% of their purchasing power to Black-owned businesses. She's the host of a podcast called Built to Last, and if you haven't been tuning in, you absolutely should, that amplifies the stories of Black founders, past and present. Her debut book, More Than Enough, Claiming Space for Who You Are, No Matter What They Say, was an immediate New York Times bestseller and won the 2020 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work. She is currently writing and executive producing the book-to-television adaptation with Anonymous Content and Paramount Studios. Her work appears in the New York Times, British Vogue, Glamour, and The Hollywood Reporter. She has also written for the hit show Grownish and has appeared on camera for a range of media outlets, including ABC News, The View, and lives in Los Angeles, California with her husband. Welcome, Elaine.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and I'm so excited to be here sharing this virtual space with all of you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. And are you tuning in from Los Angeles?
I am. Yes,
Fantastic.
I'm a transplant. I hearing you say that I'm based in LA is still like, it's like new for me because I've been a New Yorker for like 13 years. But I am back in California where I came from. So yes, and it is nice and sunny here. So no complaints.
Excellent. Oh, good, yeah. Good. Well, we are thrilled to have you. You and this program are sponsored this evening by the George S. Parker Lecture Fund. And this is a conversation that the Peabody Essex Museum is really excited to present as a hybrid presentation that both touches the fashion and design initiative that the museum has going on, but also our new civic engagement initiative that is led by a small but mighty team of extraordinary people, including Danielle Oslin, who helped put on this evening's event. So we're grateful to you for your time and for spending this evening, or I guess afternoon, maybe, with us. So Elaine, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump right in.
Let's do it.
Excellent. And I'd also like to very much encourage people to submit your questions in the Q&A box, and I will be looking at those questions and submitting them to Elaine as we continue in our conversation. But so to begin, through your career in media and fashion, you have become a force for change by sharing your personal lessons on race, identity, and success. When did you begin to see yourself as an activist, if that's the word that you would apply to yourself?
Well, I have such an interesting relationship to that word. I don't identify as an activist, but I also, if someone identifies me as that, I don't shy away from it. I think, like, you know, much like the term feminist, I think we've had to reorient ourselves with, you know, what it actually means, especially now. And for me, my relationship to activism and the concept of being an activist evolved during my time at Teen Vogue, and really being kind of educated by the next generation, the Gen Z coming up. And, they very much, a lot of the sort of thought leaders of that generation did identify proudly as activists and owned that title, and didn't feel like, I think that my generation and the generations prior have felt like you have to, there's some, like qualification, and like you really have to be on the front lines of, the movement and on the grounds and as an organizer to earn that title. But I think that I've sort of come to understand it through a different lens, a much more inclusive lens that's, recognizes that the work of activism can look a lot of different ways in different spaces, and sometimes your authenticity is your activism, and that's something that's actually a quote from Amanda Stenberg, who is an incredible Gen Z actress, activist, and somebody that I got close to during my time at Teen Vogue. And it helped me think differently about my walk through the world, how I show up in different spaces professionally, and even personally. And, I think of it like, especially if you find yourself in spaces that were not built for you, sometimes your authenticity is your activism. Your authenticity can be a radical act. And I think, somebody just said living your truth is a form of activism. And I absolutely agree with that, especially again, when your truth is in resistance to an existing norm or oppressive system, and you are speaking your truth to power, and when it might be uncomfortable or unpopular, you're absolutely creating space for a new truth to take hold, and a new voice or perspective to be heard. And so I do think, I think of myself at least as a change agent, certainly. Like I find myself, in these sort of conservative or formally considered sort of conservative spaces, or I won't say conservative, but I'll say traditional, and I found myself in these more traditional spaces, and I feel like I'm there to disrupt it. I am there to challenge the status quo, to change the way things are thought about, or the way that things operate, whether that is, in a traditional magazine, in a corporate structure, or a television show, on a network like CBS, which is rather conservative, and like really pushing the agenda to expand the conversation around, racism in America, systemic racism, and also shows like Project Runway being able to incorporate like the cultural context of fashion while we're analyzing fashion, and I really enjoy that. And that's just something that comes naturally to me. And that's like my work in the world. It's one slice of the work that, that I think needs to be prioritized in order for these larger systems to change. So I think like, don't underestimate, the work that you're doing from wherever you are in the world, and like whatever ecosystem you happen to have some measure of influence in. Like, don't shy away from your opportunity and really your responsibility to make a difference right from where you are, whether you identify with the term activist or not. You can be a change agent no matter who you are, where you work, where you're from. You know what I mean? You can lean into the change that you want to see.
Yeah.
So that's my philosophy on activism.
Excellent. Well, thank you. The question, and I think you kind of touched on this, that I was going to follow with is sort of, what has that journey been like? But I think you've done a really good job of sort of describing to us how it is an iterative and an evolving process. And, I've have your book. I've read your book, which is great, by the way. So who hasn't read it, you absolutely should. But one of the things that stood out to me was that I felt like you were a person who really follows and leans into their intuition and their instincts. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that is how how your career has shifted over time, and sort of what has led you from one path to the other.
Well, I will say I have, I've been pretty intuitively led, I think, since, that first existential crisis that I hit coming out of college. I think we all go through, where we're like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And how am I going to pay my bills? And like, hopefully, is there a way to do that and enjoy my job, which is pretty much where I'm going to spend the majority of my life. So I had a bit of a reality check early on, in terms of just needing to get really clear about those answers and like what my passion really is. I mean, it's such a big question, especially for a college student. But I had this really great opportunity to work at a really prestigious advertising agency in New York City through an internship program called MAPE. If for anybody out there who's young or knows young people who are searching for their path, MAPE, the Multicultural Advertising Intern Program, is an incredible pathway for young people of color to, explore the advertising world. And they pay you, and, all you got to do is pay for your flight, and they put you up in room and board. So it was amazing. But I learned that that was not a good fit for me. It was not the industry that I was meant to be in. And so it sort of scared me straight, because I got a glimpse into the atrophy that can take hold and how you can start to shrink when you find yourself in environments that actually aren't conducive to your growth, or that you're not really meant to be in. And so I came back from that experience really laser focused on trying to figure out, okay, well, if not that, then what? What am I here to do? And I had to do some soul searching, and I really didn't want to be one of those people who find themselves like mid-career going, how did I get here? Like, this isn't I'm not happy, or this is not my definition of success, even if it looks like it on paper. Like, I wanted to find a fulfilling career path that was really in line with my authentic interest and passion and gifts, and like where I wanted to like grow and have the greatest impact. And so long story short, found myself in realizing that my dream was to, be a magazine editor, and like that's where I wanted to start. But then I came across this woman named Harriet Cole, who was a multi-hyphenate before multi-hyphenating was a thing, before millennials came along and made that a thing. And she had figured out how to do it all within one career, within one lifetime. And like, I loved this idea that you can be more than one thing in your life and in your career. And really, it's about figuring out, what is your mission? What's your purpose? Like, what drives you? What makes you feel alive? And then like, what are the different ways that you can iterate on in a long career path? Like, and like, I saw this model for that. And she started in magazines, and then she branched out and became a multiple time best-selling author. And she had what now would be considered a really popular podcast, but then it was a syndicated radio show. And she was a regular, she was a TV personality and all of it. But it wasn't just about her showing up in these different spaces. It was her showing up with intention at the intersection of her passions, which were, Black culture, spirituality, and style. And I'm like, you could do that? Like, you could do that? You could work in fashion, but bring, your values and your culture into it. And I just was so inspired by that. And I think that's kind of that is absolutely the blueprint that I followed in my career. And it gave me a sense of liberation and freedom. Like, I don't have to just commit to this one thing. Like, I am starting in magazines. I'm going to learn everything I possibly can. I'm going to get, as high up on that masthead as I can, not really expecting that I would ever become an editor-in-chief at 29. That was never even in my wildest dreams. But I knew, like, there's more to do. Like, and even when I'm in fashion, I'm not going to be of it. I'm going to be there to change it from the inside out, because there's not enough people who look like me or who are come from the places that I my background, and being the first person in my family to graduate from college, like going into this prestigious world, I just had a chip on my shoulder and a lot to prove. But I thought there is going to come a time where I will have to take a bet on myself and make that leap of faith that Harriet made when she kind of jumped out in the parachute and just started her own company and was able to branch out and do all of these things that she's been doing for a magazine for herself. And so that preparation, that mental preparation was really important for me, because it allowed me to, it called me back to check in with myself at multiple intervals in my career to go, is it that time yet? Like, is it that leap of faith time yet? Or is there more for me to learn here? Is there more for me to accomplish here? And I think it's so important that as we all navigate our careers and different workplaces, that we are crystal clear about what it is we're there to do. Like, what are our goals? What are we there to learn? And then I think it's important to always be mindful of keeping this question in eyesight, in your eye line. Have I reached the point of diminishing returns?
Right.
And if the answer is yes, then be prepared to pivot. Like, pivoting is not a bad word. And it's also not something that just like popped up in the middle of the pandemic. Like, people have been pivoting for a long time. And I think like and it's not as scary when you're prepared for it. So I have sort of an adventurous spirit when it comes to designing my career, and I'm not afraid to pivot because I'm clear on my bigger purpose and like why I'm here. And I think that there are lots of different ways you can live out your purpose. You know what I mean? So I hope that that's helpful for anybody out there who might be feeling a little bit like in a career rut or not really clear on where they want to take it next, or feeling a little bit stuck. Like, it's never too late to rethink your path and to get on a path that feels more fulfilling for you and more rewarding. Thank
you. So you have been a key figure in the fight to raise awareness around issues of representation, in particular in the fashion and beauty industry. How do you feel that the fashion industry stacks up against other industries in terms of social justice, equality, and civil rights protection?
Well, I think that like a lot of other industries, I think especially since the murder of George Floyd, which instigated a lot of critical conversations around race and the workplace in a way that I've never witnessed in my lifetime, certainly. I think that there's a greater awareness about racial inequity in the workplace and how it shows up. I think that we have a better grasp on the language around, how to talk about these things. I think for a lot of people, they were introduced to the concept of systemic racism and still trying to maybe wrap their head around it. But at least there's been this, introduction to seeing the world in a more complex way. If you haven't been living that experience as a person of color, I think a lot of people's eyes opened up and a desire to do better emerged. And I think this feeling of like this collective responsibility to do something about improving the conditions within their sphere of influence became more of a priority. Whereas I think previously it's been sort of someone else's job to address that stuff. And for a lot of us, we have been able, a lot of folks have been able to navigate with blinders on and not have to see the injustices that don't affect them. And I think those blinders at least widened or hopefully came off for a lot of people. And we realized that it's not just on the D&I person, the diversity and inclusion expert to tackle these issues. It really does require all of us to understand our role in dismantling these systems that weren't set up to benefit all of us, and to help break down some of these barriers and have hard conversations, and just have that courage. I will say though that since then, I have felt that um, there has been maybe more lip service paid to um, some of these issues that have been exposed than there have been sustainable practices and measurable um, forms of accountability put in place. And I really think that in order for any industry to truly, you know, create the kind of progress that's necessary, we really do need measurable metrics, and we need like new standards by which we all measure our success. And so that's partly, you know, that's a really big part of why I sort of joined the effort with someone named Aurora James to start the 15% pledge, because I realized, you know, here we are, like Black women in this rarefied industry in fashion, media, with, you know, contacts and access and authority and influence that most Black women don't have, and in this particular space. And like, what are we doing with it, you know? And so it was an opportunity for a call to action to some of these industry leaders to say, okay, here's one thing, because I think everyone felt like, what can we do? There must be something we can do. There was a desire to do better, but there wasn't a clear call to action, and a lot of people didn't know where to start. So this 15% pledge created one very clear call to action that, you know, if you are a business leader, you can participate. And it was, you know, dedicating 15% of, you know, your purchasing power to Black owned businesses, meaning Black vendors. You know, if you're a retail space, if you're a museum, if, you know, if you are, you know, you know, I mean, we really mostly worked with retail to start, but across different industries, from Sephora to Macy's. And it was not easy necessarily to get these leaders to commit to this kind of like measurable, you know, accountability initiative. But ultimately there's no other way. I mean, otherwise it's lip service. Otherwise it's
Right.
just saying you're going to do better, and then there's no check-in, there's no accountability, there's no follow-up. So I think I'd like to see more of that, frankly. I'd like to see more companies, you know, not wait for some outside nonprofit to come in and tell them what to do. And I think, you know, no one knows your business better than you do. No one knows your company better than you do. Nobody knows your customer and what their needs are better than you do, and how you can be better servicing them and their employees. So I think I would love to see more people take it upon themselves internally to take leadership positions around figuring out, what does that measurable metric look like within your organization, and like, how can you introduce that into the consciousness in your in the company culture that you work in, and push for that change in a consistent and sustainable way. Because I think that's the
Right.
most important part. You
Yes.
know, we can all get up in arms and we can all, you know, talk the talk and learn the language, but if we're not practicing what we preach in a sustainable way, then I just think we are failing ourselves, and we're failing at the end of the day our customer base and the people that we serve.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that that sustainable component is very important, because it is also about building trust, and, you know, not
Yep.
sort of stumbling over yourself in an effort to, um, you know, do something in an insensitive or inauthentic way.
Yes.
But to really think through it. And sometimes that can be challenging in and of its own right, because
Mm.
it's slow and it's
Yeah.
hard and it
Slow
takes
progress
time.
is better than no progress.
Yes, exactly. That's wonderful. Thank you. Um, so to pivot now to fashion for
Mm.
just a moment, more specifically, you know, you know, I'm a fashion curator. We have a fashion program at PEM, and the museum is working with the Philadelphia Museum of Art and the Fine Art Museum of San Francisco to bring the Patrick Kelly Runway of Love exhibition to our institution in June of 2022. And, you know, typically throughout my entire career, fashion in the context of an art museum has been, to varying degrees dismissed. It's actually even a little bit of a sort of a tired question, is fashion art, is it not? And I don't even really address it anymore because to me it is absolutely. But, I do think that fashion generally, and I'm sort of thinking specifically at the moment in your book where you were talking about fashion journalism, I think with a colleague of yours or a fellow student of yours, and he dismissed it. And that lit a fire in you where you felt so compelled, to not only defend the industry, but in a way, I feel like it almost kind of shifted your direction a little bit. But, it has been sort of dismissed as superficial, not taken seriously. And so, why do you think that fashion is a subject that is worthy of regard? And how do collections and presentations that we're seeing currently in on the runway bolster the public's understanding of specifically Black culture and Black history?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I watched the Patrick Kelly sizzle reel that you all put together for the upcoming exhibit, and it looks so fun. It looks so exciting. It looks so just like vibrant, and I'm excited for that. I think that you're absolutely right about, I think fashion is often disregarded as frivolous, and I have also been, in a position to have to defend it. And I think, to me, really, fashion is a platform. I think fashion is an art form. Absolutely. I think that it is both, like there's fashion as an industry, and then there's like fashion in terms of how we relate to it. And I think that, there on an individual level, it gives us the power to express aspects of ourselves and how we want to be seen in the world, in an artful way that unlocks our creativity, and that signals to the world something about us that we may not be able to communicate otherwise. And I think that is incredibly powerful. And then as an industry, I think, for too long, it has been exclusive by design, and has left a lot of people out of the conversation. And I think, fashion is at its best a mirror that reflects back to us something about the world that we're living in, something about the culture that we're in. And to see fashion now opening its doors, opening its arms, and being more intentional about being more inclusive is indicative of what is happening on a grander scale around some of these larger conversations around inclusion. And I think it's creating like that, the trickle down effect of that is really, it can't be underestimated. Like for people to be able to see a pathway to possibility, or to see themselves in spaces they've never seen themselves in before, to be able to see themselves as part of a luxury landscape, or to see themselves in or on the cover of Vogue, recontextualizes kind of the possibilities for your future as a young person. Like I know the impact of representation from a first person perspective. Like I wrote about this in my book. Like my very, very first memory was related to the issue of lack of representation in media. I mean, I remember having to I was asked to do a family collage, and I'm like, we were as a preschooler, and we were all given magazines, and all the kids were flipping through the magazines, cutting out people. And I was just like sitting there realizing, oh my God, no one looks like me or my family except for my white dad in these magazines. And like, what does that mean? What does that mean about me? Something's wrong with me. I'm different. Oh no, and then suddenly I felt shame for the first time associated with my skin color because of this lack of representation, because I was looking for myself in these pages and did not see it. It was a mirror, and I felt invisible, like looking into the mirror. That has an extraordinary effect on a young person's identity and self-esteem, confidence, especially as a young girl. So to be able to change that experience for young people, by changing, first of all, decision makers at the highest level, in fashion and in media, is so important, because the stories don't change until the storytellers change. And and then that same thing applies when we're looking at runways, and you don't see, and it just looks like, it's just whitewashed, and we don't see the world being reflected back to us. It's you're losing out on like the richness of what our country is actually, what are made of, like the diversity that we're built from. So anyway, I could go on and on about this, but I will not. I just think I think that being able to utilize fashion as a medium to incite deeper conversations about who we are and about our culture and what we want to see, because also fashion is fantasy, and I feel like we can imagine a different future sometimes through the lens of fantasy, which is also an art form. So I just think I think it's absolutely diminutive, reductive to talk about fashion as just like this frivolous thing that absolutely doesn't matter. I think for those who are saying that, they just, frankly, they're uninitiated. So it's up to people like us to really break it down. And I will sit somebody down and break it down any day. I will. And I think like watching Project Runway, hopefully people can also, I mean, it's an easy way in to a world that might seem kind of like unrelated to your life. But I think when you can see creativity on screen and like through the lens of fashion, I think it helps give a greater appreciation for the craftsmanship and the art form that is fashion. So this is a little plug as well for Project Runway, because it's coming up October 14th. So yeah.
No, that's fantastic. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's escapism with purpose, and it's multifaceted. And there are many entry points, I think, for people when they really, shake off that frivolous tagline and think more deeply about, what it can offer us in our lives. So what contemporary designers or fashion influencers do you think are doing an exceptional job of using their platform to talk about issues of social justice?
Well, one I have to shout out is Kirby Jean Raymond, who is the designer behind Pure Moss. He's also the creative director at Reebok, and the first Black creative director at a sportswear company, which is pretty insane when you think about the impact that Black athletes have on the world of sport. But so for those who aren't familiar with Kirby, he did this. He was actually the first Black American designer to show during Couture Week, and he decided to show at Madame C.J. Walker's mansion. And she's credited as like the first Black female millionaire for her hair company, and it's a historical landmark. And he, even that decision alone was so intentional in kind of, the way that we've always been conditioned to think about couture is through the lens of whiteness. And he recontextualized couture by centering it in an unapologetically, decidedly Black sort of backdrop. And his show, he decided to, and for anybody who doesn't think that fashion is art, I challenge you to watch that show and then come again, and tell me again that fashion isn't art, because he decided to bring to life, I don't know what the number was. It was it was like this like never ending stream of women walking down the runway in these inventions, Black inventions, from the mop to this mobile phone to, I mean, I could go on and on. And he created this like larger than life sort of theatrical representation of these Black inventions, but turned it into couture fashion. And it was such a reclamation of like our contributions to this country, and through our creativity, through our you know, enterprising kind of innovative you know, I guess creativity. Like I mean, I was so moved by it, and the whole thing was, it was about more than fashion for me. It was a cultural event. I mean, he led into it with Elaine Brown, who was a really important, significant character in the Black Panther movement, and somebody who just a really radical thinker. And she was up there giving like a riveting, powerful speech that bucked the system in such an unapologetic way. My mind was blown. I was like, I cannot believe I'm watching Elaine Brown on stage at a couture fashion show that is run by a Black man, and almost everyone in the majority of the audience is Black. All of the models are Black. Like, this is something I never thought I would ever see in my lifetime. And you know, this is a designer that comes from Queens and like brought his culture with him, did not shape shift or assimilate to kind of the culture that is the culture of couture as it exists. He like understood the rules and then broke all of them, and then redefined it in a way that we could see ourselves authentically as a part of this community. It was incredible. It was incredible. And it's like, whether you enjoyed the fashion or understood it or not was so secondary to the cultural relevance of this event that he created, that all was through the lens of fashion. Like, fashion was just the platform to make a statement and to send these messages down the runway. And I was blown away. So if you haven't seen it, check it out and share it. And I really truly believe like this is one of those events that, like, it's a historical event that I don't think will even be fully appreciated until years and maybe generations to come. But I certainly feel lucky that I got to witness it in my lifetime, and I certainly appreciated it. And I hope that it inspires a whole new generation of designers to see a place for them in fashion, and not feel that they have to conform and leave parts of their authentic selves on the sidelines in order to make it in this industry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was watching it unfold online, and it was, you know, it was very powerful. And it was interesting to see what, you know, because I think a lot of people didn't understand what was happening. And again, were dismissive because they didn't understand. And then you started to see people put the pieces together, and the whole conversation shifted. And you know, that's a very powerful tool, and it is a very powerful use of a platform for sure. So this is my last question. I think we're going to turn it over to the people in the audience. But so through your book, More Than Enough, and your new masterclass titled Designing Your Career, you have decided to share lessons, advice, and powerful reminders to people, and particularly women, everywhere. And I know that there are people in the audience who are interested in this question, but what advice would you give your younger self in starting your career? And what does success look like to you today?
You know, this is a hard one for me, because I think that like, no matter what I would have said to her, she probably would have done the same things that that she was going to do anyway. And I think that it was necessary to do all of those things exactly the way I did, even if, you know, I don't really believe in mistakes. You know, I kind of believe that, like, sometimes, you know, detours lead you towards your destiny. And you know, I think that this sounds a little cliche, but it's something that it's kind of become a little bit of a mantra for me. And I think I would have just instilled this in my younger self maybe sooner, is just, you know, simply put, when the world asks you to shrink, expand.
Hmm.
I think I found myself many times in spaces that um, feel restrictive and that feel like I have to leave parts of me um, behind in order to conform and fit in and maybe even excel. But that's a lie. And whenever I've been able to push back against those constricting forces, I've actually found um, myself having almost like this, being able to channel um, purpose that is more beneficial for that benefits more people than just myself. Whenever I'm able to find that courage to push past that and say the thing that needs to be said, or pitch the story that I'm scared to pitch, or, you know, whatever the fight is, it's worth it. And you know, and I would also probably tell her, you're not going to win every battle, and so choose your battles wisely, and take care of yourself along the way, because you can get burnt out as somebody who is trying to, you know, constantly be a change agent in spaces. It can exhaust you. And um you know, your career is a marathon, not a sprint. So take care of yourself along the way, take breaks when you need to. And yeah, I would probably give that, those are probably be some of the pep talks I would give. And then the other part of your question was, oh, how do I define success now? I think, to me, success is akin to whatever liberation means to me. And I think liberation can take on a lot of different meanings, but um, feeling liberated from being labeled a certain way or being stuck in a certain box, and being limited by what seems possible to other people, or even to myself. Like, I think just the word limitless comes to mind. Like, I want to feel limitless in a way that I felt, that limitlessness that I think I felt when I was a little kid, before I realized that, like, there were limits to that the world puts on you, especially when you're a person of color or a woman. So I try to fuel that, like, that part of me that still believes in that limitlessness, so that I can dream up the next thing, you know, and believe in it and go after it. So and in order to do that, you kind of have to be liberated from some of the things that hold you back. So that's my newfound definition of success.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Um, so we've got a couple of really great questions, and I'm going to start here because I'm excited to see Solio name pop up in the Q&A, who actually has a fashion exhibition at the Schomburg. I think that maybe closes today, but definitely worth checking out. But the question here is, trailblazers like Lois K. Alexander Lane, founder of the Harlem Institute of Fashion, did a great job of creating their own platforms to amplify Black creatives in fashion. How do you think we can better support such independent organizations and redistribute the power and economic resources that are monopolized by larger fashion organizations?
What do you think, Petra?
Well, I mean, I think that And I think that your initiative is one in which is an excellent start, where you're creating an opportunity and an incentive for individuals to think about who they're supporting, who they're carrying, who they're promoting in their retail establishments. But I think in the fashion world, as it pertains to museums, you use the phrase of, the storyteller, and you have to sort of change the storyteller, and I think expand the storyline. And I think particularly in the fashion museum world, there has been so much focus privileged to high design in an effort to legitimize the art form. That now there is an opportunity to start to dig into some of that cultural and historical aspects of the clothing and retail trade that didn't have space before, wasn't allowed space, wasn't given space before. And so I think that, that's one way, is to start to expand, whose stories are being shared, with whom, by whom, and how, and what opportunities are people given and encouraged and welcomed to add their own narrative to that story, because we can't simply capture them all.
I agree with you. And I do think having, being intentional and deliberate in terms of creating safe spaces for people that have been excluded from these rarefied worlds, and like outreach programs that bring people in that haven't traditionally seen a pathway into these spaces before. I think it's something that's really important. Hopefully talks like this help with that, help allow young people of color to see someone that they relate to, someone that they, just someone that they can see themselves in, having conversations that matter to them in a space that maybe they didn't see themselves being as welcome before. Yeah. So
we have a couple of questions that
I don't know if that answered the question, but
I think so. And Solio, if you're still here, please add into the chat. We have a couple of questions that pertain to your background, people wanting to know what the beautiful work is behind you, and what it looks like in full.
Oh, I would love to. Okay, so I'm sitting in front of a work by Corey Pemberton, who is this incredible emerging Black artist. I actually was introduced to his work through my masterclass, because that incredible team over at masterclass created this physical space to shoot in, and they had this incredible piece by Corey on the wall that I was like blown away by, and I immediately asked like all the questions, like, who is this? Where did you find this? Can I have it? Like, where do I get it? Or work like it? And they directed me to, if you guys ever come to LA, you have to go to Pop-Up Home, which is this sort of hybrid vintage high-end furniture store meets an art gallery for underrepresented artists. So it's a really, really cool place. And I literally, as soon as I wrapped my masterclass, I went straight there and I was like, Corey Pemberton, like, show me everything that you have of his. And they were like, we're sold out. And I was like, no. And eventually I became friends with the owner, and we ended up in the rafters, like looking in the rafters for, I don't know what. And I saw this piece in a corner, and I was like, who is that? And she's like, oh, that's actually Corey. And I was like, bring it over here right now. And so I purchased it immediately. And she actually called him on FaceTime. I got to meet him.
Oh, cool.
And I got him to tell me a little bit about the piece. And basically this is Daisy Bates here. And she is an unsung civil rights hero that was really influential. She walked in with the Little Rock Nine, and she held their hands, and her and her husband would convene all of these young Black kids at their house and prepare them for what they were going to experience. as trailblazers, you know, walking this path no other child had before, and what would come with that. And she was a journalist. She had a newspaper that was focused on advocacy for education for young Black kids. And she joined the school board to make sure that there was someone, you know, in leadership to look after these children in their best interests, and just was like she was the original. I've been nicknamed jokingly like Gen Z auntie. She's the original Gen Z auntie of the civil rights era. And I just feel like it's total kismet that I found myself inheriting this work that honors her legacy, and I feel so connected to her legacy. And I didn't even know about her before finding this piece. So I always do my zooms in front of it to like share, you know, share Corey's brilliance, but also share kind of that incredible piece of little Black history with folks. So thanks for asking.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we have a question here. So in this world we're living in and constantly navigating, so many of us have reevaluated how we spend our downtime and care for ourselves. Would you share a little bit with us about what you do as part of your own self-care and personal wellness?
Oh, I love that question. I too am trying to get better about my self-care, and I have not always been good about prioritizing my wellness. I've always prioritized work over my wellness. And actually I think the pandemic was an opportunity, or 2020 was an opportunity for me to reevaluate some of that. And I actually moved to LA with the primary, you know, purpose of you know, prioritizing my wellness, like find sunlight, being around sunlight, having more space, being more connected to nature. I sound like such a hippie right now, and not a the New Yorker that I have been for the last 13 years. But usually every decision that I made was really like fueled by like what is best for my career opportunities. And for me, it was like staying in New York. That's where fashion and media, that's the hub of it. But, you know, I think the pandemic showed us that we can, there are a lot of different ways that we can live our lives, and we don't have to do this rat race thing just this one way that we've always thought we had to. And a lot of people were moving to the country, and I was like, well, then if everyone's moving, I'm moving, and I want to go. Where do I want to go? What feels good to my spirit? And LA called, and I came out here, and have spent more time hiking than I ever have in my life. And I am trying to be the person that is better about cooking and being more domesticated. That hasn't happened quite yet, but I'm trying to be more connected with just small intuitive practices of like, what do I need right now? What do I need right now? And as intuitive as I've been, as intuitively led as I've been in my career, I have been very disconnected from my intuition as it relates to taking care of myself and my body. And so I'm trying to spend less time in my head, more time in my body, to take better care of myself. Because I am arriving at that age where I have friends who are discovering chronic illnesses, being diagnosed with chronic illness. And I think a lot of it is because we have been neglecting ourselves and our needs, and prioritizing work over everything for too long. I mean, we all came up in this hustle, at least my generation, in this hustle culture, this like grind culture, this girl boss culture. And I think that we've been thrown out of balance. And I think this is an opportunity to try to come into balance a bit. So I'm reading this book called The Clarity Cleanse. If anybody needs a book recommendation to help kind of like center you and prioritize wellness, it's by a doctor, a kind of holistic doctor. His name is Dr. Sadeghi. That's all I'm going to say. The Clarity Cleanse, highly recommend it.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question that I think I'll end with is, how did your trip to Africa impact your values and goals?
Ooh, I love that question. Who asked that question? That's a good one. So I actually talk about this in my masterclass. I went to Africa for the first time, and I say Africa because I went to a couple different countries in Africa. I went to Rwanda, in Ethiopia, that first trip. And I was a beauty director at Teen Vogue at the time. And it was the first time I got my hair braided. And I had Senegalese twists, and I got them done like in this braiding hut. Like I sat on the like dirt floor, and like these 4 ladies were surrounding me and just braiding my hair. And it was such a cool experience. And it was an opportunity to kind of connect with a part of my heritage that, my mother is Black, my dad is white. And I grew up in a predominantly white area, but on the weekends, my mom sort of immersed us in Black culture through Saturdays at the salon, which is my aunt owned a Black hair salon. So I spent like every Saturday of my childhood there and watch, some of the similar techniques, but not in a hut, obviously. And then the Black church on Sunday, but being able to kind of go to Rwanda and have this experience was really remarkable. And I remember I got the idea to do a story. Well, I came back to New York and to Condé Nast, the Condé Castle, which is very much predominantly white and very prestigious kind of culture. And I had these like long Senegalese twists, and some of the commentary and like the hands and the hair that it attracted inspired me to do a story about Black hair as a form of activism. And just Black beauty, embracing Black beauty, your natural beauty as a form of activism. And there's a longer story which you can catch on the masterclass, but it was one of those times where it was like the first times as an editor where I really leaned into my cultural identity and the authority that comes with that to tell a different kind of story, to center a different kind of beauty, and to go a little bit deeper, to use beauty as a sort of platform to talk about celebrating diversity and to talk about kind of like more complex aspects of identity, and through the lens of beauty, a summer hair braid story. And so it had the best of intentions, but because Teen Vogue at the time really had not built up a sense of trust with the Black community or with communities of color, ultimately this story backfired, and people they didn't read the story. They only saw the picture of this light-skinned girl model that I had cast. She was someone who was biracial, and I told the story of like being a biracial Black woman going and connecting with my heritage through this Black hair journey in Africa. And the long story short is, when the internet saw it, all they saw was what they thought was a white woman, a white young model wearing a Black hairstyle, and they thought it was cultural appropriation at its finest. And it went viral, and for all the wrong reasons. And it was a harrowing experience for me as a young editor who was, for the first time, like putting all of my, currency, like the currency that I had built up, into taking this bold step in with this story, and like to find that no one even read it. Everyone misinterpreted it because of this picture. It was pretty difficult, and it was my introduction to cancel culture. Mm-hmm. But what I am proud of is that even though I definitely cried myself to sleep that first night, and I was definitely attacked on the internet because people didn't know who I was. They didn't know I was Black. They didn't read the story. I thought, this is an opportunity to have a deeper conversation about colorism and our lack of representation of the myriad of Black beauty. I think this was, and I owned that it was a missed opportunity as a Black editor to not have cast a darker skinned Black woman, even though I was trying to tell my story, and I'm a light skinned Black biracial person. But all of these nuances need to be contextualized properly, and you have to be able to build the trust there were steps skipped on my part, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about my blind spots. I learned about how to be a better advocate for my work internally. I learned how to be a better advocate for my community. And I did not shy away from that opportunity to have hard conversations with my community and people who didn't really understand where I was coming from, in order to continue to do work. Like I basically I had to not be afraid of getting it wrong in order to have another opportunity at getting it right. And so I think like it was a formative experience for me as an editor. And I think it was an experience that my whole entire team ended up learning from. So very memorable experience. And I wouldn't have changed a thing. I think I needed to learn that lesson the hard way. And I thankfully haven't had that experience since. I've been much more careful. But thank you for asking. And yeah, if you want the full story, it's all on that masterclass. I go in on basically what to do when you get canceled. Because if you're making groundbreaking, if you're attempting to make like culture shifting work and paradigm shifting work, like you're gonna not always get it right. People are not always gonna know where you're coming from. And like the risk of you being canceled is pretty high, but it doesn't mean that you should shy away from your calling and your mission. You just should be prepared for it and have an action plan on how to handle that controversy when it comes up for you. So I survived.
Thank you so much. This was an honor and a privilege. We really appreciate spending time with you.
Here.
Thank you for sharing so freely of yourself and of your story. And, you know, if you come to the Boston area and want to hop on a train or take a nice cruise down the coast, you are welcome to come visit us in Salem anytime. We would love to have you. And
I'll take you up on that.
Yeah, please do. And best of luck to you on the adaptation of the book and Project Runway. I know I'll be tuning in. So it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who tuned in.
Bye.
Bye.